The Pin Drop podcast brings you the most intrepid chat on the podsphere. Interesting people sharing their personal formula for success, stories of personal growth, people confessing their fears and what they have learned from going to the edge. Hosted by me, Vicki, founder of We Are Intrepid. We Are Intrepid is a personal growth philosophy and an adventure experience company. Our sole purpose is to show you how to experience the truly life-enhancing effects of advantage through adversity, to understand how our fears and emotions work, and how to unlock the huge potential we all have to lead a more fulfilling and rewarding life. And maybe for you, that starts with listening to this. Welcome to the podcast, Jenny Wordsworth. My favourite long-distance friend, who I've actually only met once, which is ridiculous.
That's hard to believe.
Isn't it? I know. When I come to explain how we met and our background and all of that stuff, people probably won't believe us. But Jenny is the most intrepid person I know, I think. Inspires me to do crazier and crazier things in my life. Jenny, you're also a lawyer, an entrepreneur, we'll come on to that in a minute, and most notably an extreme endurance sports athlete. And you first came onto my radar when the 2020 Great Pacific Race was postponed due to COVID. And you reached out to me with bucket loads of sympathy and said, you know, if you kind of regroup and get a new crew together, reach out to me and let me know, because I'd love to be part of that, or at least support you in some way. So I remember checking out your profile and thinking, oh my God, has this woman got a story, got mental resilience in bucket loads? And yeah, you were very much then on my radar. And as soon as we kind of got the green light to go back in 2021 and I had to gather a new crew together, you were top of my list. And that was when we met, right?
It was. I actually hadn't remembered that it was that I'd messaged you. I couldn't actually remember how it came to be that I heard about you doing the event. But I was definitely looking for the next challenge, and the sea is something I was very attracted to. But yeah, I'd forgotten that it was that it had been postponed because of COVID. I'd completely forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And then we spent the first and actually now only time we've met each other for real. Oh no, we had dinner one evening.
Oh, we did. No, that's twice. You're quite right. It is twice.
yeah, better than once.
After I got back from the row, we met up and had dinner, didn't we?
We did. But we met that day in London. I think with someone else he was looking to join the team to do the row. And at the end of that day, we all sort of decided, like, okay, we're just gonna go for it. This is gonna be the team, which is actually quite a big deal from someone you've just known for a day or met for a day, and you go through so much on a row or an expedition of that nature.
I had stalked you quite extensively though.
Oh, so you felt like you knew me.
Well, one of my favorite stories, which I actually want you to retell in your words, not mine, because I probably have got elements wrong or have perhaps embellished it even, although I'm not sure if it could be embellished, but is about your South Pole expedition and what happened to you then. And that, obviously, in addition to a lot of our exchanges and getting to feel like I really knew you, was just enough, all that I needed to give me reassurance that you had the mental strength it took to do something like an ocean row. But you can tell us about that later. But yeah, we had that meeting, didn't we? And then we were like, right, let's go. And then what happened?
And then what happened? I can't remember if it was the next day or 2 days later, but I got a positive pregnancy test. And thought, oh, this is a bit of a shock. I quickly did the math, like, can I still do the row and have a baby? My husband
I can't believe you. Oh, yeah.
And said, no, you cannot. That is not possible.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that one of you in your relationship is sensible, at least.
I still wanted to consider. I really struggled to let go then of not being able to do the row, because I really wanted to. And as excited as I was to be pregnant, it was super awkward because these two girls who've just met, and then you then have to say, I didn't want to just say I can't do this anymore. So you were actually the first person that was to find out that we were pregnant.
No way.
Wow. I have to tell Vicki the exact reason, and she's going to think I'm completely mad that I put all this work and effort, into doing this with her, and then the next day going, no, I think I changed my mind. I'm good.
Can't tell you why.
Yeah, Ophelia is now 21 months old, little toddler running around.
Yeah.
So I never got to take part in the ocean row, but obviously followed you guys every day, and was with you in spirit.
And we made a pledge, didn't we, that one day we would do something together, which we are making happen right now.
We are, yes, we are.
But tell us a little bit more about you, Jenny, and your background. So you're obviously a lawyer by trade, but you've quite recently set up your own business, which is just taking the world by storm. And I'm super proud of you for what you do. It's amazing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's very kind. So we launched Ovum about 18 months ago. We're still a startup, I guess, but we are focused on improving fertility outcomes for those who are trying to get pregnant. I got a bit of insight into you're going through that, trying to get pregnant and then not, and it's complete hell. And so that has been going from strength to strength. Our next product is the first recyclable pregnancy test, which I'm incredibly excited about. But I guess what we're known for, especially with IVF clinics in the UK, is our first preconception supplement. And we have clinical trials for that starting later this year. And it's a lot of fun. I absolutely love it. It's quite a jump from having been a lawyer.
Yeah, so how did you make that change? Why and how did you make that shift? Just a lifestyle thing?
Partly. So I was head of legal at a big renewable energy company in London. It's a role I've probably been aiming towards my whole career. And then actually when I was in the role, I thought, just not sure about this. It wasn't just the hours, it was the people I was working with. There's a lot of ego in the room on board level. And I just really wasn't very happy there. And so I asked to take a sabbatical to go and do my MBA. I always thought I would maybe start a business of my own one day, but I didn't know in what. The MBA started, and in week one of the MBA, the whole thing was cancelled because of COVID. It was a very in-person tech-focused MBA. And it was like, oh, well, I don't really want to go back to that job. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to write 3 business plans and screw it. I'm just going to launch one of them. And that is my replacement for the MBA. I'll put X amount of money in. And if I lose it all, that's still a lot cheaper than my MBA. And we'll just see what happens. So that is what I did. And Ovum and everything that we do and want to do came very easily to me because I feel very protective of women who are going through this, trying to get pregnant. And I did not like how products are marketed towards them. They're such a vulnerable headspace. You would do or take anything if you thought it might help your chances of conceiving. And it really bothered me that people played upon that. So yeah, just went for it. And it's done very well. Yeah.
And quite rightly so. And what were the other 2 ideas that you didn't go forward with? I'm intrigued.
Oh, I can't tell you in case I launch them another time.
Oh, because they're coming next. Right. Well, I'll find out at some point.
Hey, offline.
Offline. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, so back to your rather more intrepid side. I first got to really get a sense of who you were, I guess, through social media, as often happens. Through the incredible stories of your South Pole expeditions, 2 of them, and all your other endurance races on top of that. So you've done Marathon de Sables, you've done, well, you tell us, you've recently done an incredible bikepacking race in Kyrgyzstan, which I followed you on, which had a slightly abrupt ending. But you tell us about all the amazing things that you've done and your endurance career.
done a bit of everything. In the beginning, there was very much a focus on ultramarathons. So I left law for 2 years as a professional paid athlete to go and do that. Wasn't quite for me. You'd think that being paid to just run full time was like the dream, but actually I really missed using my brain. And I ended up just overtraining. I was a lot younger. I didn't really listen to my coaches, and it took the fun out of it. It went from me being able to pick any race I fancied doing. And for me, I would pick a race based on the location. So, let's do a race in Iran. Let's go and do that. Yeah. There's places I wouldn't normally think to go. And then suddenly, I might come 10th or 20th or 3rd. It didn't matter to me. But when you're sponsored, they would prefer you to do less racing and really focus on the performance. And so that was a lot less interesting to me. So I did that for 2 years in America, and then went back to being a lawyer. And from there, I was much happier fitting in these expeditions, these crazy ideas, really got into mountaineering in a big way. I much preferred fitting that in around work. That brought me a lot more happiness. And so, I've been an endurance athlete with the North Face for many years now. And I think that, as you're right, the first kind of major expedition I did was going to Antarctica, where I attempted to break the speed record, going solo, unsupported and unassisted from the coastline of Antarctica to the South Pole.
And what was that record?
Current record is 38 days. Yeah, which still stands.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. I mean, all of this, putting together the row expedition. It's a huge amount of work. It's a huge amount of money, a lot of time. Doing it solo meant a lot to me. I think I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something like this myself, and be entirely responsible throughout the expedition. I think it probably took me about a year to get ready for this. Find funds,
which is actually quite a short period of time for something like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely impatient with things. I'm not someone who's going to set out like a 5-year plan to kind of get ready for something like that, which has its pros and cons for sure. But I just wanted to get on and do it. I told my whole family on Boxing Day this is what I was doing, and there was all right, okay, Jenny, whatever you say. They weren't that shocked, I don't think, at all. And I left later that year, and about 20 days into the expedition, I became very unwell. I had really bad kind of bowel symptoms, stomach ache. I probably knew deep down that something was not right, but I didn't want to fess up. So just to explain the environment you're in, you're just skiing all day, every day. You're by yourself. You do your own navigation, but every evening you need to call base camp on your satellite phone and tell them where you are, and answer a few quick questions just so they know you're with it, you're safe, fine. It takes about 30 seconds in the evening, and that's really that's the only person you speak to. And I eventually confessed that I thought there was something wrong with my stomach, and there was a bit of a reaction because the year before, a British polar explorer had died from complications from peritonitis, from a bowel infection, and I was displaying the same symptoms. And everyone was very, very nervous that is this happening again? Because it was a horrible experience for everyone involved, understandably. So that was at the back of my mind. But it's also very difficult to confess because I didn't want to be pulled. I didn't want it to come to an end.
And to put that into perspective, Jenny, because obviously I've been in a situation myself where, it's not, you can't get immediate help. But just to kind of put that into perspective for people who might not have that immediate appreciation. What would it have entailed for you to, you just can't, there isn't anyone to help you, right? You have to fend for yourself.
Yeah, you do. So first of all, I had to make sure I was in an area where a plane could land. So there's certain areas in the route I was taking where they're so heavily crevassed that a plane's not going to go there, unless they absolutely have to do. That would be like more life or death scenario. But preferably if you're conscious and relatively okay, you're just, progressively getting worse, they'd rather you were somewhere where they could safely land. So there's that to think of. But the recording of myself speaking with the doctor about where I was, and this happened over 2 or 3 days. Apparently it's the most polite British argument that's ever been had about whether someone needs to be medevaced or not. I was, of course, I don't
want to still got the recording. I'd like to listen.
No, I don't. I think the insurers needed it. It's like, no, I think I'm perfectly fine. Well, we don't think you are. And in the end, they kind of made the decision for me, which I'm obviously grateful for. But I did have this peritonitis, and I did have the beginnings of a bowel infection that could have become, something a bit more severe. But everything about that attempt was about the world record.
Yeah.
I remember there was a lot of press before I went, and everyone would say to me, when you're doing these interviews, you can't say that you're just doing this for the record. And it was like, but I am. That's why I'm doing it. Like, what's wrong with aggressively kind of saying that that's the main goal? Well, people don't like to hear that. It sounds a bit egotistical and all this kind of, but that was the truth. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I remember my husband saying to me, you should probably come up with like a plan B. So that might be the primary goal, but what's the secondary goal? And then, is it just reaching the pole? Is it just turning up? I was absolutely, no, that's not me. Like, I'm going for this one thing and that's that. And so it was really hard to come back. And then I was in hospital, not for that very long. I recovered very quickly once we had the right antibiotics. And the extraction, getting back to the UK, a little bit dramatic, but I recovered very quickly. And then I remember sitting in my hospital bed, and I was like, I had my phone on airplane mode. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I didn't want to speak to friends or the press or anything like that. I opened the Metro in London and thinking that would be a pretty safe space. And the first page is a big picture of my face, and it says, London lawyer fails to reach the pole. I was like, God damn it. This is everywhere, wherever I'm going. And I remember at the time I sent my dad a text and I said, I don't think I want to be the kind of person I am anymore, because this is, I've had loads of failures in the past, not reaching the summit of certain mountains, all these kind of things, but this was very, very public, or it felt very, very public. I'm sure there's only a handful of people who'd heard of it, but it felt very public to me. It had so much press before and when I got back that I really didn't enjoy. And then this was also the first major expedition where a huge amount of funding had come in to support it from different sponsors. And so the idea of having to say to them.
And what kind of funds do you have to raise? What kind of funds do you have to raise to do that, Jenny?
So I climbed, before starting the solo attempt, I climbed Mount Vincent in Antarctica as a way of sort of preparing for the altitude and the cold before setting out. And that was actually, my husband, Matt, was there as well. That was our honeymoon. So we climbed that together. I'd actually forgotten about that. We climbed that together, and then he flew home and then I started. So that added a huge amount of expense. But I think all in, gosh, I can't even remember. Easily 80, 90 grand. Yeah, probably just shy of 100 grand all in. You could do it, if anyone's interested, you could do it for a lot less than that. So having to tell people that it hadn't happened, I was really dreading. But I think it lasted, honestly, I don't stay down very long. I had about 3 days where I was like, I'm just cutting myself off from the world. It was just me cuddling my dog on the sofa. And what I learned from that was, probably was a bit ridiculous to be so obsessed with the world record. And that if I am this kind of person, which I clearly am, that is not going to change, it never has, I need to learn how to fail a bit better. And or how to fail. There's nothing wrong with feeling like a failure in the immediate response to something not going your way. Like having the resilience to quickly deal with it, process it, and crack on. And so when I talk about that period, people think, oh, it sounds like you were really sad for weeks. It was like 3 days, maybe 4. But it's it wasn't pleasant. And then I very quickly decided I was going back. I'm very nervous about putting that out there, because I did not know if current sponsors would say, that's lovely, but we're not funding this a second time.
We've been here before.
Yeah, exactly. Then there was also the other issue was, this is when I was head of legal at a big, busy company. And so whilst they got behind me the first time for me to disappear for like 7 weeks or whatever it was, like, are we going to do that again? And the answer was probably not. So that was interesting. So I wanted to keep very quiet about it at work until it was definitely going ahead. And then I had a quick phone call with the sponsors and just said to them, this is what I want to do. And my main sponsor at the time, a protein brand, said to me, we've been waiting for this phone call. Of course we have your back. We
knew you were going to go again.
Even that just gave me goosebumps. But people like that having your back means the world. And I got back from Antarctica in January. The season in Antarctica where you can go and do these things is their summer, and that's November to January. So I got back in January, and that November I went back. Did a lot of work that year on not being obsessed with the record. And the truth is, even if I hadn't got the bowel infection, I wouldn't have got the record anyway. The weather was beyond. They say it was like the worst record they've had, worst weather record in like 30 or 40 years or something. Huge.
And so
storm.
I'm interested in that. How did you balance the ambition to get the record, which clearly never left your mind, with the ability to maintain perspective and manage expectations that there are obviously certain things beyond your control that may get in the way of that ambition?
Yeah, I had to make it the secondary goal, and it was easier to do that second time around because I'd seen what was really involved in breaking that record. And the truth is, when I heard 38 days and you do the math at what you'd have to travel each day, it was a bit like, I've got this in the bag.
Yeah. How hard can it be?
With the crevasses, the navigation, and also doing this solo. There is no one else to rely on. Every decision is on you. So you need to have all of your wits with you. You can ski for as long as you want, but you need to make sure you're resting adequately so you don't make a stupid decision the next day.
Yeah. Well, and so I've never been to Antarctica, but I have been to the Arctic Circle, as you know, because we did the same race, not at the same time, but at different times. And yeah, those decisions about, layering up, wearing the right clothing, I made a massive mistake of not bringing my goggles down over my eyes at one point, and when I eventually did, I realized they were frozen. I couldn't see a thing. Stuff like that. If you're on your own, completely on your own, you only make that mistake once, don't you? So
absolutely,
really self-reliant.
We really are, and that was the appeal, and still is the appeal of doing solo things. But I feel like I've learned all the lessons I was looking for doing solo expeditions, and now I'm very much focused on team things. I love other people. I'm good. I learned what I needed to know. But yeah, the second time around, I was about to say I had a great time, but a lot of people say the outcome was pretty shocking. But I reached the pole, and until about 100 miles from the South Pole, I was 2 days ahead of the world record. So sure, there'd been bad weather. I had like 2 days where I went snowblind in one eye. And again, that was, you were just talking about your goggles. I was in a horrific storm, could not see a damn thing, but was adamant I wasn't, waiting it out in a tent. I wanted to keep moving, and I needed to take my goggles off to see anything. And actually the sun's still incredibly powerful, and it burnt my eyeball, which was horrifically painful. But yeah, onwards, and I was doing really well, and I felt really good. And then I started suffering from a condition called polar thigh, which isn't that well understood just yet. And me having it and how bad I ended up having it actually has helped people understand in the medical community a bit more about it. So I'll explain why in a second. But it's best described at the moment anyway as a type of chilblain. It's a reperfusion injury, so your body is trying to repair it while you're in the field, but it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse on this, they call it the reperfusion loop. So,
and is that because of the cold? So your body can't repair the wound because it's so cold? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it cannot get better in the field. You need to go home. Right. And what started off as these tiny little ulcers, and I'd had a tiny little ulcer the year before, but it was nothing. And I did nothing different from last year, from the first year to the second year. But the second year, it was pretty bad, and it was getting these little holes. And I was like, let's keep an eye on that. Did everything you're supposed to do. Like, I thought I knew everything about polar thigh because I was adamant that I was never getting it. And as I'll tell you in a minute, I ended up with the worst case that anyone has ever seen. And the context for that is like, this was my second attempt. I'm not coming back third time. Okay, I've got other things I want to be doing. But so your injury does, and a lot of people ask to see the photos of it, or they want to print it, and I'm like, be very careful, because I don't want to put people off doing these kinds of things. This is an extreme scenario, and it's because I was hell bent on finishing what I'd started. I was only 100 miles from the pole at that point. The record's out the window. But what basically happened is I was skiing along in a storm, a whiteout, could not see a thing. And I had a really minor fall, just a slip, landed on my back, and I heard and felt as these little ulcers, they were getting a bit bigger, they all just split open. So it became one open mess. And sure, I've got a first aid kit with me, I've got painkillers with me, but it's not that extensive. I had something with me called Granuflex, which is great for putting on these little patches of polar thigh. And as each little hole that appeared, I would cut out the tiny bit of Granuflex I needed to cover it. And so when it kind of split open, it was like, yay, what do I do now?
Oh my God. And was it painful? It must have been. I mean, I've seen photos of it, so I know how horrific that was, but it must have been painful.
It was agony, and I don't really know how I did it, is the truth. And some people celebrated me for it when I got back, and I wasn't quite there with that yet, because I thought, I know I have the mental strength and resilience to push through difficult things. Like, I know that about myself. But Jesus, how did I do that? I
don't know how you did that.
Should you be able to push through that kind of physical pain? A lot of it was blocked out. The other thing was I didn't have any painkillers left. I'd used them, and so for the last 8 days there was no pain relief. And in some ways that was a good thing, because like we talked about, being on a solo expedition, you're responsible for everything, so I can't be completely high on morphine. Like, God knows what I'd do. So but not having pain, trying to sleep at night was absolutely horrific. Just horrific. And so even things like putting the tent up in very high winds, which you need to be doing very, very fast. When you stop skiing, you're talking, the temperature's depends on the day, -20, -30, -40. You need to put the tent up immediately. And it's a very slick operation. It's very fast. You then have to build a quick snow wall around it in case there's a big storm rolling in overnight. So you've got minutes to get all this done. Trying to do that while you're dragging a leg behind you. Every time I'd have to get down on the ground to do something, just be a little tear would come out. But I made it. I got there. It was very surreal arriving at the South Pole. There wasn't really much there. There was a small camp.
Was it a kind of anti-climax in some way?
Yes. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I sat down. They should have known I was about to arrive, because you have to get your satellite phone out when you're about a couple hours away to say, look, this is where I am, so they know to expect you. And I think I arrived at 2 a.m. So whoever ran the camp, my friend Devon, he might have been in bed, but the message didn't get through, and so I just skied into camp. No one there.
Hi.
I opened a tent that looked like I was allowed to go in it, because you have to remember the Americans have their research station there, and there are a lot of rules about not going into their area. So I was terrified of accidentally doing that. Right. I walked into the tent, and there's Devon, the head of the camp there, and he's like, Jen? They didn't know I was coming, and I just kind of sat down, had a beer, and we chatted for a couple of hours. But what was really strange is then, Devon's a close friend, and he was before, but it's when he said, your leg really smells. And
this is the most astonishing part of the story for me.
Yeah, because I had to speak to a doctor on the satellite phone every day about my leg, because it was bad. And but I've listened to, I haven't listened to the recording of this one actually, but they told me that I kept saying that it was getting better. And so I could see parts of my leg through the dressing I told you about, very sticky dressing. You cannot take it off until you've had a long shower. Once it's on there, it's great for expeditions.
Yeah, it'd be like taking a Compeed off the worst blister imaginable. Yeah,
exactly, the perfect description. But I thought I could tell from looking through the gaps that it was healing. So I thought it was just this huge scab. I thought it was a very, very superficial injury. I did not know how deep it had gone. And I couldn't smell anything. I'm not lying about that. I could not smell a thing. And Devon was mortified. He's like, you are stinking out this large tent. And that was really shocking to me. There was no doctor at the South Pole. I think there's 2 doctors who work in Antarctica on the British base, and they sort of obviously are in different places at different times. The next day, the doctor arrived, and he looked very shocked when he saw my leg, and he asked Devon to come into another tent to help undress me, have a look at it. But he said, we cannot remove that dressing here. There's no showers here. There's no way of getting it cleaned. So, it's not infected. which is kind of normal in Antarctica. You would normally get it infected, but we need to just keep this covered up. We're going to keep you comfortable until we can fly back to the base camp. So once you reach the South Pole, you got to leave Antarctica. And the way you do that is you take a smaller plane. How long that was, I want to say 4 or 5 hours to the main base camp, which is a bit bigger. They have a bit more medical equipment, and that is where the main plane lands from Chile to take people from Antarctica. So I had to get back there first, and I think I was there for 3 days, and the doctor, I was on a diet of alcohol and morphine, and I had the best time. And there was people there, like a lot of people will visit the South Pole to do lots of different things. So you can go there just to see the South Pole. You can go there to take photos. Other people were doing expeditions, so there's people around, and
you were having a party with every single one of them.
yeah, and I've got very funny videos from that time. I don't really remember it, and I now know the doctor was just keeping me comfortable because he realized that it was about to hit me, what had happened to my leg, and the pain was about to catch up. The adrenaline and the focus you had to get you here, it's all going to start wearing off. And we're not in the right place for that to happen. So let's just keep Jenny very entertained. And I had so much fun. And then every evening we play cards together, whatever. But people would say, like, can you wrap up your leg? So even though I was obviously fully dressed, I would have another couple of down jackets wrapping my leg, so the smell didn't come out. And what I later find out is...
And you still couldn't smell this at this point?
No, couldn't smell a thing. And I really tried, like, putting my nose right in there. And there was just nothing. And what I later found out from the psychologist who came to see me when I was back in the UK in hospital was that was a coping mechanism. Which continues to
switching off.
My brain's
survival.
We're going to the South Pole. You are getting there, come hell or high water. And if you're able to smell this, you'll probably push the evacuation button. And that determination it's a lot.
And you wonder why I was so sure that I wanted you to be on the boat with me. Someone else who literally never gives up, although you've been tested more than I have even. I mean, incredible.
I think though,
sense of determination and just,
I wouldn't be surprised if some people thought it was quite stupid, to be honest with you. And I can see that side of it, but and I now have like a huge scar on my leg, as you can imagine.
You had to have skin grafts, didn't you, I think?
They have, first of all, had to cut out. So a lot of the reason it was smelling so bad was so much tissue. So in the photo of it, which is I appreciate, not a pleasant photo.
It is on your Instagram though, hey?
It is,
yeah. Who wants to go and have a little look.
With like a trigger warning, because some people are horrified by it. So that black stuff is all dead tissue. But when they removed the granny flex, I was still the dressing that was on there. I was still in Antarctica. The doctor came with me to the shower once we were back at the main base, and I was handed a bottle of whiskey. I can't remember all the names of the drugs they gave me. Much stronger than morphine. I think they had a tiny bit of fentanyl, and I was stripped off, put in the shower. And I just remember holding on to the sides of the shower and kept drinking. And every time I complained, they said it sounded like, the girl who helped me get undressed said it sounded like a wounded animal was slowly dying in the shower. And having to peel off that granny flex was the most painful thing I've done. And actually, when I did have PTSD from that for a couple of months, I couldn't get in a shower. The whole thing freaked me out. Then they had to get me from the shower back to the medical tent. So they chucked me on a mattress and attached that to a skidoo and whizzed through the snow back to the medical tent. And then we waited for it wasn't a medical evacuation. It was just a normal, like you're on the next flight to go home. And got back to the UK, landed. I was in a wheelchair. I was convinced I'd be able to walk, but it was very difficult. And my husband met me at the airport. He is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. So normally he'd be the guy to operate on this.
What great luck.
Great luck. Except he didn't really want to operate on his wife.
You knew he'd come in handy at some point.
Yeah. Well, my parents say, we think this is why you might have married a surgeon and a doctor. Always sort of unique. I'm rambling on. But I thought I was going home. I still, at this point, I refused to look at my leg in Antarctica once the dressing had come off. and I was still high as a kite, and they kept me so drunk. And I thought I was going home. I was very excited about seeing my dog. And Matt was like, Jen, like the team at the Royal Free, they're waiting for you. Why are they waiting for me? And they'd been in discussions with the doctor in Antarctica about what treatment I was going to need. And I thought I was popping home and finally going to get to see my dog. So I was pretty upset they were making me go straight to hospital. I thought Matt was really overreacting and I wanted to go home. So I won that battle. We went home. I got to see the dog. I also, this sounds ridiculous, but I was wearing a thong, and I knew that it was Matt's boss that we were going to see at the hospital, consultant needing to operate on me. And I've had dinner with him and his wife. I was like, I'm putting grass pants on because I'm not getting stripped down to a thong in front of this guy.
I love it.
So ridiculous. No one cares about that. But I was like, no.
Well, it's the little things that are important here. The details.
Yeah. Put my granny pants on, said hello to the dog, and then we went straight to the Royal Free. Again, I truly thought, I remember in the car on the way there, I was like, they're just going to clean this out. This is all a bit dramatic, like go to the hospital as soon as you land. And Matt was like, Jen, you're going to need like a couple of operations on this. And that was a real shock. Again, not only could I not smell it, I did not think the injury was that big a deal. And yeah, I ended up needing 2 operations. And they actually, what was good that came out of it is they learned a lot about the injury of polar thigh. This was the first time they'd ever looked under the hood of the injury and operated on it because no one else had ever needed it before. Yeah. So they got to look at the pathology, and actually it helped. There's a couple of papers coming out about it because it has helped them understand more why something like this happens in the first place. So a lot of people will tell you it's kind of your own fault. You didn't clean your skin, you wore clothes that were too tight, it's an abrasive injury, but we now know that's not actually the case. Right. A lot of it is genetics. It's like a vascular issue.
Right.
So that was good. Can help other people. You
were of help to others. Amazing.
Yeah, and
I mean, wow.
Yeah, when I look at the injury now, I think the bottom of it, and yeah, it's quite big. It looks like the outline of Antarctica to me.
No way.
The coastline. Yeah,
no way. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, I don't regret the outcome of that.
That's like your tattoo. You didn't need to get a tattoo then to commemorate your adventure. You already have one.
Yeah, exactly.
Indelible.
Yeah. But no, it doesn't.
And has it ever, you know, I mean, obviously it must have taken you a while to kind of recover immediately, but, or, you know, even midterm, but are you still affected in any way physically by that? Do you have any limitations on your strength or no?
No. I was so lucky that it was all just, it didn't go to the muscle. Yeah. If it had affected my muscle and movement anyway, that would have really messed with me. But no, it's very, very superficial. It doesn't look pleasant, I get that, but
so lucky. Well, I think that is like a war wound. That's a badge of honor, honestly. What an incredible thing. And I think you should be, well, you know, hopefully you have come to terms with this, but I certainly think you should be more proud of that outcome in a way than if you'd even got the record. It's just an incredible feat of human endurance and determination and commitment to you know, everything that had gone into that. And I understand that, you know, you tried it the year before, and you know, you feel so much debt to all the people around you who make these things possible for you to do. It's such a privilege to be able to go out and do these things, and you feel a huge amount of debt. But to literally put your life on the line, like that's insane. Well done.
Well, I don't think my life was on the line. Wow. At most I might have lost a leg, but yeah.
Still, that's a pretty big price to pay, isn't it? But yeah, so that was like, you know, I probably didn't even need to meet you to know that I needed to get to know you, and that I would have loved for you to have been on that boat with me. But and much as you try, you have not yet persuaded me to row again with you on another rowing endeavor. But we are planning to do the race across America next year together as a team of 4 women. So our pledge to make that adventure happen at some point is happening, and we're going to be making that kind of public and starting up our campaign. We've got 2 other women on board who are insane athletes, and we're super excited, aren't we?
Yeah, we have to step up our game because we are obviously not cyclists by background, and we've suddenly landed on a team with 2, probably the most experienced women we could have found to do this event with. So it's incredibly exciting, but we have
Yeah.
a huge amount of time. But that's the interest. I'm sure you're the same. The interest to me in taking on a race I know nothing about, in a sport I know nothing about.
100%. It's exactly it for me. I don't want to do something that I've already done, really. Not that I would even now consider myself any kind of expert at ocean rowing, but yeah, I want to do something different every time, and if it can be something that I don't really actually know anything about, and I'm probably not that great at, or I've got fears associated with, then all the better.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're gonna give that a really good go, hey, next year. But so what would you say your career, and by career I don't just mean, you know, your professional career as a lawyer or as an entrepreneur with your business, or maybe you will answer it from that perspective, but what's your career taught you the most after everything that you've just told us?
It has taught me, I've always had a habit of leaning into the stuff that I'm most scared of. I very much felt that first at work when I was a junior lawyer. I think even maybe at university, I realized that I was completely terrified of public speaking in a way that no one else seemed to be. Like, everyone had normal nerves, but mine was like paralyzing. And I then said the only way to fix this is to say yes to every single opportunity that comes in to speak, whether it's the boss at work saying, we need someone to do da 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 da, just quickly reply and say yes, figure it out later. And it was a horrible thing for me to do, but I did that for about probably a year, and eventually kind of got to an okay place with it. Now I do a huge amount of public speaking, it's fine, but that is what I learned from my career. It's the same now with my career now, or with expeditions or new sports. If there's an area that you're avoiding, something you don't like, it's probably a sign that that's what you need to be doing. And I'm glad I fixed that public speaking problem, because it was awful, but it's very unpleasant to do that work, and it's very easy to just not do it. You know, where's the growth?
Yeah, and we're very similar in that respect. So I'm exactly the same, and I think the thing that I try to focus on, like you just said, is almost sign up for something that seems so big and overwhelming that it creates sort of a forcing function that you're just going to have to work it out, and maybe you work it out later and you don't stress about it right in the moment of making the decision to do it, but you know, it is big, it is setting out an ambition, you know, the potential for failure is huge, and that's where I think that's where the growth is, right? Because you have to learn stuff that you would otherwise just put off forever.
I think we've talked about this before, but there's a huge amount that comes just from putting it out there in the first place.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this quote by William H. Murray. He's a Scottish mountaineer. It's very long, but definitely one worth Googling. If you Google William H. Murray Providence, and he talks about how just the very act of putting it out there, all these manner of things that come into play, people who want to help, people who are interested, and things start moving. And that momentum is a huge part of then getting to where you want to be with it. And when I first decided I was going to Antarctica, I was very shy about telling people other than my family, because I didn't want to it was a huge jump to find 100 grand, get people to believe in you without much of a background in that kind of thing, other than the ultra marathons. I didn't know if I was going to pull it off. Like, I felt like I definitely was going to, because I'm so stubborn. But I didn't want to not. I hated saying I was going to do something if I then wasn't going to.
I
still don't like doing that, but it's a bit different. And I realized actually so much came from me saying to everyone I know, the neighbor, you never know who your neighbor might know. You never know who the person you're chatting to in the coffee shop might know. Tell everybody what you've got planned.
And also I think there's a lot to be said for the more that you say, you know, you're going to do something or succeed in something, the more you start to believe it yourself. You're just kind of putting it out there into the universe, aren't you? And then you start to buy into it, even if to start with you're thinking, who am I to make this bold statement and these, you know, set these grand intentions? So I'm completely on the same page with that. What would you say has been like your biggest failure? I mean, you said earlier, obviously, the first expedition to the South Pole felt like a huge failure at the time. Would it be that or something? Even if on reflection, you know, now you don't feel like it was a failure at all. It was a stepping stone to something else. But at the time,
it's definitely the first trip to Antarctica. I think it's because it was so public, and it was my first very, like, let's make a big fuss, a big deal out of this. I mean, it wasn't a failure, but in some people's books, I guess I can see why it was. But I've had so many. I mean, you could talk about not reaching, like, you know, I did Denali, one of the 7 summits in Alaska, didn't get to the summit, I had to turn back. And I mean, that's incredibly annoying. That happens, it's completely outside of your control, which in some ways is comforting, because as long as I know I've done everything possible for the preferred outcome, and it was bad weather, I mean, I'm not God. I do remember once doing a race in China, and it was an ultra marathon running across the Gobi Desert. And they got a bunch of pro athletes, they flew them out, they made a big fuss, they were the first people doing this race for them. It was incredible. They pitched it as like Hunger Games, so the athletes were all against each other. And I was the leading woman for a while, so the camera crews were always following me, and then broke my foot falling down a hill, which is quite hard to do, but I managed it. And I remember being, I broke a tiny bone, but I couldn't carry on. And they took me to this very remote hospital through the middle of nowhere to have it, a cast put on it. And I remember whilst they were doing that, the film crew was in my face, streaming live to the Chinese social media network is called maybe WeChat or We something. Yeah, it's quite famous. It's like their Instagram. And apparently I had a profile on there, and everyone had been following the race. And it was like asking live questions. And one of them was, oh, Miss Jenny, how does it feel to be such a failure?
Oh my God.
And it was lost in translation a little bit, but it was just too funny. I was like, well,
what did you say?
Yes, I have failed. I don't even know what I said. I remember laughing because it was such a funny question. They didn't mean it in that way, but it was just very, very funny. I was like, yeah, I guess I have failed. But they put a cast on me, and they were going to fly me home, and I was like, no, I want to go back to the race. I had a lot of my friends who were doing the race because we'd all been flown out as a team, and I went to the last checkpoint and was responsible for making the noodle soup. And so as everyone arrived in, they got to see me. I had a great time. But yeah, I think it's like we talk about failures or perceived failures. It's okay to be sad when you fail at something. That's very normal. You're not ever going to get rid of that. But it's building the resilience in yourself so that when it does happen, you're like, this is shit. Yeah. This is shit.
But I think you're right. You know, if you don't allow yourself to kind of process those emotions, those feelings of disappointment, which are inevitable, then you can't. You're just burying something that's gonna come back up again, right? So you're absolutely right. You've got to let the emotions come through. You know, process them, feel them in all their glory, and then get past it. But you had quite the adventure in Kyrgyzstan as well, right, recently, which didn't quite end as you'd hoped it to, but I still think you have the best stories, Jen, honestly.
It's funny though.
They're always very dramatic.
I don't mean to be dramatic. Someone was asking me about that race the other day, and I said in front of my husband, I was like, oh, I had the best time, told them all about the country, the route for the mountain bike race. And my husband was like, you completely forgot to mention about the horrific accident you had on your bike that meant you were out of the race. And I was like, and the internal bleed. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot about that.
We had a great time, and the scenery was amazing.
Yeah, also we were toddler free for 3 weeks, so I don't know anyone who wouldn't think that was great. But yeah, I picked that race because I'd never been to that country. I don't know why else I would have thought to go. Kyrgyzstan. I was very excited to go there, and Matt's a much better mountain biker than I am, and it's not very often you get to do something like that together because of schedules of kids or whatever. So very, very exciting. And off we went. Didn't know anything about bike packing. Had a couple of mountain biking lessons. And I mean, that country is just stunning. Really? There's lots. I think the ice ultra that you did there about Geelong.
Yeah, they're about to do a race there. Yeah.
I mean, everyone should go there. It's such a beautiful, beautiful country. And I mean, the Silk Road Mountain Race, they bill it as the hardest mountain bike race in the world. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough. There was things that we climbed that I'm not even sure I would mountaineer without mountaineering equipment. And here I am holding a bike
holding a bike over your head.
Yeah, with all my equipment, tent, sleeping bag, food, everything. At times, I'm not sure about the safety of that event. Fine. But yeah.
As evidenced by your colossal fall and ending up in hospital.
Yeah, so there's a part of the race where we joined a road, and it wasn't that busy a road, thank God. And coming down that road, there was a pothole. I saw the pothole, and basically what happened is my bag on top of the bike obstructed my my brake line, and the brake wasn't working. I just meant to tap it gently to slow down whilst going over the pothole. And as there was no reaction from me putting on the brakes, I clearly panicked and really slammed on the brakes and went absolutely flying over this pothole. I was going pretty fast because we were downhill on a very tight switchback, and my helmet split open. I really thought I definitely thought I'd broken both elbows, and I wasn't sure about the knees. Blood everywhere, but also my husband Matt was in front of me, so he whizzed away and then couldn't see me because he turned the corner immediately. And the local army were out doing some kind of training thing on the side of the road, and they kind of popped over to me and tried to lift me up to put me in a tank, which is all they had. And I was very polite about it first. I'm still in shock. There's blood everywhere, and I can't get hold of my husband. And I ended up having to swear at them to not put me in the tank because I didn't want to get in the fucking tank. Okay. Anyway, a very kind local, and not many people speak English there. They managed to get Matt and sort of described to him what happened. Boof, boof. And he's like a bit panicked. And I remember seeing him walk up the hill and pushing his bike to come to me. And I remember being so mad because he wasn't running towards me. I was like, how dare you? Like, I just had this major, you don't know if I'm okay. And he's a doctor. He's like, well, you're sitting up and you're conscious. You're fine. Yeah, we had to call an ambulance, and there was no.
You survived worse things, Jenny. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's precedent now.
It was minor. It's funny, the nerve damage in my knee is still there now, but that can take a while to come back. But yeah, so I went to the local hospital, very, very basic. They just cleaned it out, and we still had time the next day. We would have made the next cutoff. So I was like, we're getting back on the bike. Matt was like, no, we're done here. No, getting back on the bike. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, if you can cycle around this car park in the hospital, it's the most basic hospital I've ever been in. I've been in a few, very clean though. He's like, we'll give it a go. And it was so painful, but I got going. My knee was huge and I had stitches everywhere. And we carried on. I think we did another 70 or 80 miles. But a lot of that was on road again, and we were heading off into the next section, which was incredibly remote and off road. I did a bit of that section, and it was way too painful with the constant motion hitting the stitches. So I had to accept we were probably out, and my symptoms got really bad in my stomach, and I had to go back to hospital. It turns out I had internal bleeding that it was missed, understandably, in the basic hospital because they didn't have any scanning facilities, nothing. So yeah, but it's funny, my memories from that trip have nothing to do with the crash, because once I'd spent a day in hospital with the internal bleeding and I was told you're safe, it's under control, we're back in the capital, so proper hospital, we went back and joined the race route again. We went back to the mountain and started from there and did, I think, another 4 days and followed the actual race route. And we kept bumping into other racers who had heard little stories about what had happened to me. And it was lovely. So we got the experience we wanted from it. It was
did that sort of help you process the disappointment as well? A bit? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I knew I wasn't coming back.
Someone else might have to just, stick their head in a dark hole and, not have to, not want to be exposed to any of the stuff that they were kind of ultimately missing out on. But I love that is just so your attitude. It's just like, I have to deal with it, move on, get stuck back in there, go and make the noodle soup. Look, oh, cheer others on. It's fantastic.
I also knew that the bit of the race that was coming up that I'd missed because I'd fallen off my bike was the most stunning bit, and it's kind of part of the reason I was there was to see it. So yeah, we were able to do it anyway. We just went a bit slower, and it definitely helped me process the failure. Because if I hadn't been able to do that and had to go home, I'd want to go back. And I don't have time to go back and do another race. Yeah, it's very different when you've got a little toddler running around. It's harder to just disappear for a couple of weeks at a time. So, but we had such a fantastic time, and it was so nice just to hang out, just the two of us as well.
Yeah. And what would you say then is your sort of personal motto in life? Do you have like I don't know, a North Star or something that kind of guides you and that you revert to at times when you're doubting yourself or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones is the one we've talked about, which is that quote, the kind of the Providence by William H. Murray. But the other one that, I mean, it really governs everything, work, personal, and expeditions, is control the controllables. I've always lived by that. So I can handle, not reaching the South Pole because of some horrific weather, say, because I know that I've done everything else that was in my control. So you and I always talk about this when we're preparing for something. We will not miss a training session. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, I know I need to be in that start line knowing that I've done everything.
Absolutely everything. 100%.
So whatever happens from here on in, it's probably going to be something without my control, but out with my control, and that's fine. And I think actually it's the same for you, but a big draw to me to doing these big expeditions and even smaller ones is like, I don't always know what the things I can't control. I don't know what's going to happen, and that's definitely the appeal. It makes it way more interesting.
Well, I think the other side of that appeal for me though as well, I agree with you, but I think the other side of that is like the enforced discipline. And I love discipline and structure and being organized and like like ticking things off a list, and so you undertake these types of endeavors, and they're big and they require a huge amount of you, but I kind of love that, having that imposed on me.
Self-imposed, but it's so powerful. I think even if people listen to these things and think, oh my god, they just like, you two are mad, you do these big things. It doesn't have to be big to reap the benefits. It doesn't have to be athletic. Like do the 3 peaks in 24 hours, ask for more money at work. Like, it doesn't have to be what we're talking about. So don't think that.
No, absolutely not. But is there something that is still on your bucket list that you really want to do, whether it's an endeavor or just in life? What's your Everest? What's top of the bucket list that you still haven't conquered?
Yeah, you've touched on it before. So I definitely want to row an ocean as part of a team. I think I'd only be interested in doing it as part of an all-female team. When I was 10 or 11 years old, I grew up in Borneo, spent a lot of time in the ocean there. And I was swimming one day with my best friend, Charles. And as we were getting out of the sea, the end of the jetty, climbing up the jetty, he slipped and fell back and landed on a box jellyfish and died. And so I've been very fearful of the sea since then. Don't particularly trust it, don't enjoy being in it. And I've had my own ways of like getting over that and tackling it, but I feel like the final kind of way of dealing with it and still kind of processing his death is to row an ocean. And he's still, when I'm doing big expeditions, if it's like a 200-mile race, whatever it is, those moments when it's the middle of the night, you're by yourself, you're running, you're freezing, or whatever it is, whatever's going on, he's always the one that pops into my head. Him and my granddad, who's passed as well. It's those people I'll think of in those moments, and so I really want to do it because of that.
We've had that chat, and you have told me that story. It's heartbreaking, but obviously another similarity that I chose to do that ocean row because of my fear of water, and I can only just back up what you said earlier in our chat about leaning into the things that scare you, because that genuinely is where the opportunity lies, on the other side of that. And I have absolutely no doubt that you would do that, and you would actually find the memory of that, as much as it may have traumatized you, you know, in your childhood and sort of lingered with you all your life, you'll probably find that that's the actual guiding light that gets you through it. It's amazing how these things kind of turn around. And
completely. I continue to try and convince you to do it, but if anyone's listening and wants to do an ocean with me, give me a shout.
I want to emulate you. I want to do the South Pole thing one day. I've said that to you before, haven't I?
I can help you with that. No.
Exactly. Lucky for me, I know someone who's done it twice.
There's still a skills swap.
So I'll tell you what, we'll do the Ram together. You do a row, I'll do the South Pole.
Yeah.
And then we'll find another ocean to row.
Another one.
Obviously, this podcast is designed to support We Are Intrepid, which, as you know, is a business that I recently set up. And, you know, we're all about taking people away and pushing them out of their comfort zones, immersing them in situations that most of us don't genuinely ever get to be in our everyday lives of, you know, physical and mental discomfort, and just really giving them a flavour of the types of things that you and I have both done and been fortunate, privileged enough to have done. And, you know, of course, I'm realistic to realise that not everyone is ever going to have 3 years to prepare to go and row an ocean or to, you know, a ski to the South Pole, but to be able to just kind of dip your toe in the water and get going on that journey in some way, as we just said, could be Three Peaks Challenge, could be anything that's relative, you know, to you and your situation. So that's kind of what we're all about. And I like to try and ask every guest on the podcast, you know, what piece of advice you would give to that person who is, you know, kind of knows that they want to explore their true potential. They've got that kind of that gut instinct inside that's like, I really want to do something more, but still has a fear, you know, a certain amount of trepidation around taking that first step. What advice would you give to them?
You just have to put it out there. You have to take that tiny first step. I get a lot of women who email and they say, like, I've read about you, I want to do X, Y, Z, but everyone around me thinks I'm completely mad. And so it turns out, like, in their immediate sphere of influence, there isn't someone who's done anything like that. So to them, it's totally absurd. It's something they've read about in a book or heard about it in a magazine, but it's not for them. And that's just nonsense. There's absolutely nothing special about me at all. And so I would say reach out. If there's something you really want to do, it doesn't matter if it's an expedition or something to do with the work or whatever, find someone who's done it before, does something similar, and get in touch with them. And the amount of times I've had conversations with women on the phone, and at the end, they're like, I mean, you're saying I can do this? Yeah. And a lot of the time it could just be, say it's someone who's calling or getting in touch because they want to do what I've done in Antarctica or a mountain, you just need to break it down. And once you've broken it down, it's like, oh, so just biting away that elephant. This is the first step. And then it's always very empowering because they then go back into their own world and they're like, no, like guys might think that this is crazy, but I actually met Jenny and she's kind of plain Jane. And actually this is super achievable.
I mean, I'm not agreeing with you on that point at all about the plain Jane, but I know that I set up similar conversations, you know, when I first was asked to row an ocean, and I remember having Zoom calls with people who'd done it before, men and women, and thinking, wow, you're not the image that I had in my head of this like insane athlete who, you know, has all their shit together and you know, is highly driven and ferociously physically capable. Like you'd be surprised how ordinary a lot of people who do these kinds of things are.
Exactly. Right? It's not I think as well, part of that is to do with like the duty of storytelling people like you and I perhaps have when we come back. Like, I give you an example. There was a lot of interest in writing, having books about my expedition in Polar Thigh, and the Discovery wanted to do a series on it and all these things. And I was like, yeah, cool, there's Polar Thigh. I get it. It was, you can bill it as being life or death, although it wasn't really. But that's just not that interesting. And I think it puts women in particular off. Like, I'm not trying to put people off from doing these things.
Yeah.
So when you come back, I think like it's better to take the ego out of it a bit. But unfortunately, it's the ego side of it that sells the
Seems
books
to
and
be
sells
commercial. Yes, exactly.
I'd rather say, okay, I did this thing. I get that you think it's extraordinary and interesting, but let me just break it down for you and show you what was really involved. And I have found in personal experience that women especially respond to that a lot more. That's a lot more inspiring and interesting. And I've told you this before, I walked away from quite a big opportunity for a book because, you know, you do go through the process of doing the outline and what's going to be in the book. And I really I wasn't interested in making this all about my leg hanging off with a big gaping wound. I was like, no, that happened, of course, and we talk about it, but it's more about what does the reader get from this book, what's the story, and what do they take away from it? And I ended up not doing it.
How can they benefit from your experience, your extraordinary experience? That I agree. There is a duty to tell the story, to share the life lessons that come from those kind of experiences that not everyone's ever going to have access to.
And I also felt a lot of the way other people came back perhaps from these trips, I'm going to say, I especially find that with men perhaps, is there was so much ego in the storytelling. So like, you know, to summarize it, it would be like, I did this incredible thing. You could never do that. It's just for people like me. And that just never really appealed to me. So I much prefer the opposite approach, but it does not sell.
Wow. Maybe your time will come with that. Who knows? I feel like the world is changing. Well, of course it's changing every day, but you know, we're getting closer to a more balanced view on things, I think, all the time. I'm asking this question as much out of personal interest as anything, because obviously I'll be spending a fair amount of time with you riding across America. What are your worst habits?
I actually had to ask Matt this. Not because I don't think I don't have any, because I couldn't.
You just need some external perspective on it.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, for someone who's so optimistic, it's amazing how frequently I'll assume the worst.
Right.
Yeah. And he's got a quote he always says, it's something like, don't mistake malice for indifference.
Right.
So if you don't hear back from that email or the friend doesn't reply, it's not because they don't like you or something bad has happened. They're just busy. I don't act on it, but that's definitely my reaction is, oh, something awful's happened, something bad's happened. And it never has. But yeah, that's I had to outsource that one to find out what it was.
And what's the best compliment that you've recently received? On the flip side.
Yeah, it was you telling me the other day that I was sensible.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, I still thank my lucky stars that you were that sensible, because I was hell-bent on doing the Ram this summer, which is clearly utterly insane. And the more I find out about it now, the more I realize quite how ridiculous that idea would have been.
But we'd have achieved it. So just to give a bit of context, Vicki and I wanted to do Ram this summer, which is 5 months away now. And like my bike, sorry, just explain, I'm living in the US for a year. My bike still hasn't arrived in the shipments. I don't even have a bike to start training yet. Anyway, all these things. And I was like, I'm gonna have to say to Vicki, I think we should delay a year. And it goes against every bone in my body, as it does yours, because it's like this impetus, you know, like we're going, let's just keep with this motion.
Fuck it, let's do it.
Absolutely, with everything. So when you messaged me and went, I just want to say, I think you're really sensible. I was like, wow.
Thank you for being sensible, because I was not being sensible.
Yes, that's the best compliment I've had recently.
And finally, what do you wish that I'd asked you? Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or that we'll save for a later date? We'll come back to.
It's just, we kind of touched on it already, but going back to what people take away when they listen or read about things like this, the whole, like, I could never do what you do. And you and I both know that's not true. You might not want to row an ocean, and that's completely understandable. Okay, no one's judging you for that. But you will be, whether you realize it or not, taking that mindset of saying, oh, I can't do that. And you'll be applying it to something in your life, I guarantee, whether it's like the job, the career, the personal relationship, whatever it is, you will be. And you, you need to look at that and
reassess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We are all of us capable of more than we think. We just need to be put in the right environments to put it to the test.
Absolutely. I think that's why trying to, if you have no way, you can't possibly consider how you might go about whatever it is you want to achieve, find someone who's done it before or similar and give them a shout.
Yeah. Or come on an intrepid trip and you know, under the sort of relative safety and support of the team providing the experience, you'll figure out what you're capable of. Just a little window into it.
Because you go and do that, sure, it's like organized, but you will learn so much from doing that, because you will be outside your comfort zone all day, every day. And you'll come away with thinking, well, I achieved it. It wasn't that hard. It was, it's kind of a comfortable way of being introduced to it. And you will come back and you will be amazed at the mindset you will have, and how you will just look at things very differently.
Even just then, one of my insights from one of our previous trips was it sounds so silly, but even just to take away your ability to control, well, what meal are we having next, and what are we doing tomorrow? Well, you don't need to know that. It will happen when it happens. And, just doesn't matter. What comes. I mean, that even just seeing people kind of come to that realization and have those breakthroughs and think, okay, actually, no, it doesn't matter. I'll just, I'll deal with it when it happens, kind of thing. That's a big deal to a lot of people. So it can come in extreme examples and seemingly small, insignificant ones. But Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat. I was going to say I could talk to you for hours. We often do. Thank you for sharing all your stories and memories and experiences. And some of them, I'm sure, are quite difficult to retell, especially to an audience of complete strangers. So thank you so much for sharing it all. And
thank you.
And stay tuned, everyone, for our next adventure.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to get going. Get on the saddle. Thank you so much. We will chat very, very soon. The Pin Drop podcast brings you the most intrepid chat on the podsphere. Interesting people sharing their personal formula for success, stories of personal growth, people confessing their fears and what they have learned from going to the edge. Hosted by me, Vicki, founder of We Are Intrepid. We Are Intrepid is a personal growth philosophy and an adventure experience company. Our sole purpose is to show you how to experience the truly life-enhancing effects of advantage through adversity, to understand how our fears and emotions work, and how to unlock the huge potential we all have to lead a more fulfilling and rewarding life. And maybe for you, that starts with listening to this.